link to the recording and to the slides in due time. This is the practicalities. The speakers. Let's go to the next slide. So today, first of all, I will introduce myself. My name is Miguel Alvarez-Rodriguez. I'm a policy officer working on the interoperability unit in the Directorate of Informatics of the European Commission. I'm the supervisor of this NLP study. And we have the team behind that will produce the study. We have Zsófia Dudás, who is an independent advisor and is one of the facilitators in today's webinar. We also have Florian, Nathan, Emidio, Louis, and as the speakers in the different topics, Louis and Nathan and Emidio Stani, they will present this study on NLP, on public services. Then we have from the Joint Research Center, a colleague from Luca Tangi. He will be also presenting some, let's say, an overview on how these NLP technologies have been applied with examples in the European Union in public sector. Then another colleague from Digit, from my unit, Cécile Guash, along with Dudás, Daudarabisius, sorry for the pronunciation, from the Joint Research Center as well. They will be making a demo on a very interesting project. And then back to the presentation on studies reports around NLP, we have Emmanouil Maragkoudakis from Digit, presenting also another interesting project. And finally, to keep the more ethical value and legal considerations on how to use in a sensible manner these NLP technologies in public administration, we will have the view from Georgi Gitchev, who is a lawyer in Connect. So just very quickly, before jumping into the first presentation, this project is part of a service catalog action, and in this action and in this project, basically we are working with public governments all over Europe, supporting them building public service catalogs. That is one of the elements that is fundamental to, let's say, orchestrate and deliver public services in an interoperable manner, according to the European Interoperability Framework. As part of this kind of building of public service catalogs, we are talking different topics, and we have like different working strands. We have semantic data models to help governments to build these catalogs, with some tools to test and validate the solutions, to make the public service information in the back office machine readable manner interoperable and fit for exchange. We also advise on how to adopt new standards and technologies, and this NLP report, let's say, is fitting in this strand. And we also have like a community of experts exchange knowledge, and this webinar is part of this exchange knowledge, let's say, part of work. On a specific tools and solutions that we are implementing, so please, next slide. The main technical specification, semantic specification that has been developed and maintained in the course of this project, along with more than 20 member states in the European Union, is the core public service vocabulary application profile that helps to categorize and describe public services in an interoperable manner. This is complemented by control vocabularies. We work closely also with publication office in the Commission to make sure that we are reusing and we do the right practices in this topic. In parallel, we provide tools to do the mapping of the different public service descriptions and different data models, and also a harvester to collect the information, the semantic tagging, behind public services according to structured data models. And then on more community building and knowledge sharing part, we have the community where we conduct regular studies and reports on emerging technologies. And in our website, maybe the team, please, Pricewaterhouse, where you can put the link to the collection so people can go there and find the studies, the tools, the semantic specifications. We also provide supporting activities to some policy areas, and this is part of the demo that we will be showing in a few minutes. We are supporting the single digital gateway regulation, where there are a lot of obligations, some of them quite challenging, on putting information on administrative procedures available for citizens over Europe with all the harmonization, technical harmonization that is needed, plus the once only principle. And finally, we provide some training material for, let's say, IT experts on how to work on semantic data models, how to structure the information, making most of the semantic data models for machine readable purposes in order to build your public service catalogs at different administrative levels. So having said that, that's all from the presentation of the project we are working on. We will pass now to the first presentation on natural language processing. Here you can see the definition is for those that maybe are not familiar with this concept, is the machine's ability to identify, process, understand, and generate information in writing and spoken human communication. So it's kind of a technology that facilitates the interaction electronically with all type of services, and it's kind of widely spread nowadays. It's kind of taking up. The study we conducted on this topic, now next slide, will be presented by my colleagues. The goal of the webinar is to provide knowledge on NLP applied to the public service and a practical experience to illustrate with practical examples and demos and projects how it can be implemented in the context of public administration. Finally, and this is where we have the view of our colleague from Connect, present the necessary regulatory compliance about NLP to make sure that the way we apply this technology is compliant, let's say, with security and data protection and ethical values that we share in the European Union. So next slide. The agenda, very quickly. Now we have the NLP study. The second item, we will have a bit of brainstorming around what are the benefits. We'll have a question and answer, an interactive session on how a public sector can benefit from the use of NLP. Then we will pass to demos, how the public sector can use NLP. And then we will have another presentation on how we can learn from the project. We will show what is this project about. And finally, the regulatory compliance, how public administrations comply with regulatory requirements. So just going quickly to the first presentation. Please, next slide. The presentation will be conducted by my colleagues, the team of the Catalog of Service, Louis and Nathan from PricewaterhouseCoopers, who is the technical team working with us in this project. So please take the floor and thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Miguel, for the introduction. Indeed, we wrote a study that on NLP that aims at identifying how NLP can be leveraged by public organizations. And in the next 10 minutes or so, we will briefly show you a bit of the work that has been done there, Louis and I more specifically. So at the start of the study, we introduced some key application areas for NLP to show how it can be applied and to really show some examples of how NLP can be used and what it can do. And for this, on the slide here on the right-hand side, you can see 7 areas that we identified. This is not per se an exhaustive list. These are some common and interesting application areas. It's also not exclusive to the public sector, but they all can be used and are used in a public context as well. So if you go to the next slide, we'll start off with a very important application area, which is content categorization. This is an example of text classification, meaning that a set of predefined categories, so usually defined by a human, is allocated to a text, or is the text is put into the different brackets into the different categories, which makes it a supervised learning methods for the people who are familiar with that, meaning that indeed, as I said, there is a manual categorization, or at least the categories are defined, and then the algorithm automatically puts in the text in the right categories. An example of this is, for example, in customer support, where cases can be classified automatically, automating a part of the work. The second key application area is topic discovery. This initially seems quite similar to the first topic, which was content categorization, but a different an important difference is that it is an unsupervised method. Here, you simply identify as a human, or you specify how many topics you want to extract from the text, and the NLP application can then suggest this amount of topics from the text. An interesting example here is where topic modeling was used in the American presidential elections in 2016 on tweets. So on Twitter, where the application did a geographical analysis on tweets to extract information on locations in the United States. Thirdly, semantic text matching is the task of estimating the similarity between the source and the target text pieces. This sounds maybe complicated, but we see it every day. It's used in recommendation systems, in question answering. For example, a search engine. A search engine is quite an obvious example of this, where the query you put in is matched to relevant documents on the internet. Next up is sentiment analysis, also a very interesting application area, which is also text classification, but here the categories are emotions, or in a first stage, negative, neutral, or positive sentiments that can be automatically assigned to pieces of text. This is, of course, highly topical in the world of social media today, where there is an abundance of emotion and where NLP can definitely play a significant role there. Fifth is automatic speech recognition. It's the application of NLP which converts spoken words into text on your computer. Dictation is a function in Word, for example, where speech can be used to write reports. As an example here on the slide, the police you can use it, or there's a case of the police using this to write reports in a more automated way. Sixth is document summarization. This method relies on keyword extraction to reduce a text to a summary without losing information, of course, but fully automated. An example here is interviews. Hundreds of hours of interviews can really be reduced to some key insights to increase the efficiency of the analysis. And then finally, for the application area, the seventh and last application area is machine translation. Again, very, very topical, where you probably all have used this. It's where NLP is used to translate text from one language to another. Think about Google Translate, think about the e-translation tool that the European Commission developed. So these are really some interesting things where NLP is used today. And now I would like to give the floor to Louis, who will dive a bit more into how a NLP project can be structured and how we can come to these results. So Louis, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nathan, for presenting all the application areas. So here we are going to tackle the structure of an NLP project. So in short, how you can build your own NLP project from the very start of the idea to the deployment of the NLP application, and while also taking into account the maintenance of the model. So first it all starts with a statement of the issue and what is the scope of your project. So meaning that if you are working for a European body, maybe the scope would be the entire European Union. However, it leads to some challenges because you might deal with multilingualism. On the other side, if you're coming from a local authority, so maybe you are just dealing with one language, so it's more easy for you. So the scope will lead to some challenges and some opportunities as well. Maybe you've also had some on-premise IT system that you want to leverage in this case, or maybe you want to prefer to look at the cloud. So you can set some technical requirements in the statement of the issue as well. And finally, you can identify the data needed. Maybe you have all the data that you need. Fine. But on the other side, maybe you need some other data from other stakeholders and you need to involve them. And from that, little by little, you can start beginning your NLP project and draw your IT architecture. Then, second step, you need to create the team. So first, you need to take into account that the role may really vary depending on the scale of the project. I'm going for just a prototype or full-scale online service. And also, since NLP is quite a brand new topic, there is no strict role defined for NLP projects yet. So I've put here some roles that you may need as data engineer, data scientist, but it's really targeted to your needs. Then third step, prepare the data. As I've explained before, maybe you have all the data that you need, fine, but you may also need to collect data from different sources. So the first step is to collect all the data. Then, second step of preparing the data is to transform it. You may need to merge some data set, but anyway, you need to put the data in the right format. And then finally, you may need, depending on the language model that you want to use, to clean the data, meaning that you need to remove some words that are not necessary for the model to understand text. Then fourth step, create the language model. So what I mean by that is that it's really the heart of the NLP project, where all the value comes from. Yeah, there are two steps. First one is to use a language model. What I mean by language model is really the IT component that understands text. And there are two types of this model. The first one is a pre-trained model, and the second one is a to-be-trained model. The difference is that the pre-trained model is easier to use, but might lack some accuracy because it's not fitted to your data. The to-be-trained model are a little bit more complex to use, might require some specific infrastructure, but in the end, it really fitting your data, so it might lead to a better accuracy. And finally, the application layer, it depends really on what you want to do with NLP. So example, Nathan explained content categorization. So in this case, it would be a categorization algorithm. Then at this step, you have collected all your data in the right format, and you have even created your language model. Fine. But now you need to scale your NLP application, and there are two ways to do that. First one is serverless. Usually it's on the cloud, and it's the easier way to scale your application. However, it might lead to higher latency. Second one, the most flexible way to do it, but also it requires a specific knowledge on container platforms. Then at this point, you have created your language model, you have deployed it, so it's up and running, but now you need to maintain it because the accuracy of your model or the accuracy might decrease over time. In order to tackle this issue, there are two ways. First one is time-based. So every 6 months, I'm going to retrain the model with the new data that I have. Fine. The second one is threshold-based. I want to have an accuracy of at least 80%. And every time the model falls below 80%, I'm retraining the model. So in this case, you need to re-monitor your key performance indicator. Okay, so do you have any questions? And first, thank you for listening to us. And do you have any question on this part?
Yes, we have two questions. It's the same question actually from Cécile and Annabelle. Either of you, maybe you want to intervene and explain better what you want to say here.
Annabelle, please.
Thank you, Cécile. Thank you, Miguel. Yes, my question is, don't we need really to define the goal at the beginning before starting all the activities? Or do you think that it's already done at the first step when you define all the kinds of NLP applied that we may have. But I really think that we need the goal to be really defined, the domain well specified before starting with the activities, creating the roles, defining what we are going to do. That's my question. Cécile, I don't know if it covers as well yours.
So I was thinking that to know which type of data you need to identify in order to define the scope, you need to know the goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So the goal of the project is the very beginning of how you begin an NLP project, but not only NLP projects, any kind of projects. And then from the goal, you can define the scope of it, the data that you need, and finally, you are begin more to enter technicalities such as creating the language model. Does that answer to your questions?
Yes. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you, Annabelle and Cécile. Any other questions? Otherwise, we move to the next topic. The study, in any case, is published. Can we maybe share the link to the study? You can have a look, and if you have any question, any comment, you can come back to us later on offline.
Can I just have another question? So in fact, I was also wondering whether these categories, they do not whether they do not reduce the possible potentiality of what you can do with NLP, because if you, I don't know, I'm not expert enough, but do you think that they don't reduce the potential of NLP by categorizing the approach? Couldn't you mix approaches?
So maybe as you can see, it's already a little bit the case. So we had the fourth part is sentiment analysis, which is a particular example of content categorization. So indeed, we have, it's not us, because we have taken that from other studies as well. However, indeed, since NLP is an evolving field, we might have some other categories in the future as well. But here we also explain the main categories that may be used in a public sector context. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, yeah.
And just a final question, because we don't have much time, Emmanouil. Maybe you want to take the floor and say it loud, your question.
Thank you, Miguel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned about speech recognition, but how about speaker recognition and maybe the use of NLP to understand the content of a meeting and create the minutes automatically, find the correct assignees and decisions, etc.?
I think we've already tackled that.
I can take this one as well, Louis. Indeed, Emmanuel, it's a great example also relating to the previous question where different application areas can be combined. And for example, what you mentioned, it can be seen as an example of document summarization, or at least based on keyword extraction, right? If you have these minutes, they can be based on keywords, or at least on the most important sentences. And this is a great example of where speech recognition can, for example, be mixed with document summarization. It can be translated. And this is really, indeed, as also Annabelle said, I think, we differentiate them here to create an overview and to make the message clear of what it can do. But indeed, there are a lot of different mixes and applications possible.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you all for the interesting questions. So now we give the floor to our colleague from Jersey, and thanks a lot because you were yesterday in Brussels with us in a meeting. Luca Tangi he's a project officer at Joint Research Center, and my mistake, the interactive session will come later on. The topic on how public sector can benefit from the use of NLP is going to be presented by Luca. It's a very interesting project. They are doing a lot of analysis, like with an observatory on artificial intelligence, innovative public service observatory as well. They are spotting very interesting initiatives related to emerging technologies, and certainly here they will give us an insight on what they spotted linked to NLP. So Luca, please, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for inviting me today. Yes, indeed. If we can move to the next slide. So, well, briefly, I'm Luca Tangi. I think Miguel already introduced me, so I think I can directly go to the content of this presentation. I will be really brief to explain what is the GRC, which are our project on this topic. So on a broader topic of artificial intelligence in the public sector, because I want to take my presentation mainly on some data, some information, and some examples for you on this specific technology that you are treating today. So if you can go to the next slide. So briefly, the GRC. Yes, next slide, please. We are the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. So basically, we are a knowledge service of the European Commission. What we do is try to collect evidence and research to support policies with an independent view. So we don't have a political agenda. We try to be independent from politics and from political agenda, and try to, however, identifying information, data, and resources and whatever in order to support the policy cycle of the other DGs that are making policies. So if you go to the next, we are spread around Europe. We have several sites in different cities. If we go to the next slide, we can also see how we do research. So we want to be policy relevant, but we want also to anticipating issue and understanding complexities in order to already have the knowledge when the policy or when other DGs or member states in policy need some data and some information. This is what if we go to the next slide, this is what we are doing with our project on AI in the public sector. So we started discussing AI already in 2018, when there was not that much information around AI, but it was important exactly for that reason. So for trying to already have an evidence when AI will become disruptive in the public sector. So that's why we started with two projects. If we go to the next slide, you can see the first one. That is the AI Watch. So we have a big knowledge services on AI to monitor the development, uptake, and impact of AI in Europe, and we have several tasks there. And if you can see, we highlighted here the one that is specifically on AI for the public sector. So since 2018, 2019, we started investigating the impact that AI can have on the public sector. We also have another project together with Digit that is presented in the next slide. That is the Innovative Public Services project that is quite similar and is looking at let's say the creation of an observatory to monitor the impact of these emerging technologies, so AI, but also other emerging technologies in the public sector. So this is more or less the context of the research we are doing. And as promised, I have been really brief now to now present you some data and some information on what we are doing. So from the next slide on, we will present the results of one of the main activities we are now doing on AI, that is the collection of evidence on AI in the public sector. So NLP, of course, is part of this collection of data and use cases. If you go to the next slide, before entering into the details, I want to also present you another work that we are doing. I will also be really brief here. So we are on the one hand collecting data, on the other hand making recommendations. So I think these two things have to go one together with the other. So simply you collect evidence, but we also as research have the duty to create and propose some recommendation in order to support member states and public administration in the uptake of AI. So we are close to publish this. I think will be published in a few weeks, even less, probably in a few days, a report that is titled "The Road to the Adoption of Artificial Intelligence in the Public Sector." That is basically a report in which we present a list of 16 recommendations that are addressed to policymakers, public managers, private company, whoever is interested into this topic, in order to support the uptake of AI in the public sector. In the next slide, you have a brief overview of this set of recommendations. So basically, we have 4 areas of recommendation. In each of those areas, we have a list of recommendations. Then in the whole report, and I'm happy to share the link when this will be published. You have also a series of action, more concrete action, in order to support the uptake of AI in the public sector. So this is one piece of research we are doing, and we're almost close. And now there is another piece of research that is ongoing since the beginning of our research, that is the collection of cases. So if you can move to the next slide. We started this already in 2018, as I told you, and we already published one report on this topic with a presentation of 230 use cases of AI in the public sector. So basically, what's the idea behind this is simply that for understanding what is going on and how AI can support the public sector, we have to collect evidence, concrete evidence of project, of ideas, of announcement of new project, of AI systems that are already in place in the public sector. So we want to be concrete. We want to have data, to have information of public administration that are really using AI in their daily operations. And it was already there in 2019. 2020, we published this report. So in 2019, when we started this case collection. So if you can see already in 2020, we were able to find 230 cases, so 230 projects of AI in the public sector. Part of those cases, we were also able to publish as open data in our repository. So we are not only publishing the analysis of those data, but also the raw data, in order for to support and to give some information to a policymaker, researcher, or whatever want to be interested in having examples. Because at the end, I think it's extremely important when you address and when you approach a new topic, also to take inspiration from other administrations that are doing something similar, also to collect ideas. Maybe some administrations don't even know that this can be possible, but can be inspired by other administrations that are actually doing it. So we not only publish the statistics of those data, but we are also able to publish some of those data, in particular 142 cases, as open data in our repository. If you go to the next slide, we can, what we started in 2019, we are keep doing it right now. So we published a report with 230 cases in 2020, but we never stop collecting cases. So in 2000 now, I mean, this has been the last update was in December 2021. So at the end of December 2021, we were able to collect 686 cases on AI in the public sector that has been collected and validated. Validated means that they've been double checked by a second person, so that has been a bit of procedure in order to be sure that the quality of those cases it's enough good, let's say, for publication. How we collected those cases, it has been a bit an unstructured process. So we collected those cases from whenever sources we were able to find. So mainly news articles, but also country repositories. That's why you see here 123 cases from the Netherlands. Is simply because the Netherlands did an internal project in order to understand and to assess the use of artificial intelligence in their country, and they published those data as open data. So that's why we have a lot of cases from the Netherlands. And something similar has been done in Portugal. That's also why we have a lot of cases in Portugal. So country repositories, news article, We also did a survey in 2020, and we included there also the result of the survey. So basically, this is not a structured collection. So this means that the data are not statistically representatives. So as you can read also in the slide, that there cannot be done any type of comparison between countries, and I think this is important. So we are not here to state that the Netherlands are the best country in Europe in the use of AI, but simply that we have more cases from the Netherlands. So this is quite important. So we don't want to benchmark somehow the different countries, but we simply want to know what is happening, have evidence on what is happening in Europe on AI. It's a quite impressive repository in my view. So we have a lot of cases, and also all these 686 cases will be published in a couple of months as open data in the same link, in the same catalog that is in these slides. If you can go to the next slides, of course, these cases we did not only collect, but we also try to analyze according to several dimensions. And now I'm more focusing on the topic of this webinar today. So natural language processing. So one of the main categorization we did is on dividing by the type of technology, the type of AI technique that has been used in those cases. We rely on a definition done by us, or by the AI Watch, that published a report on AI definition and AI categorization. I can also share with you the link. The report is already published. I think it's important also to clarify here that we are assessing the cases according to their main technique, the main technique they're using. So we all know that that case might use, I don't know, natural language processing and machine learning together, but we simply made a choice to which is the main technology that the cases we collected are using. As you can see here, natural language processes, that is the topic of the research today. So natural language processing. So one of the main categorization we did is on okay. Sorry, I had a bit of echo. Natural language processing, that now we 20%, so in particular 139 cases among these 686 that we collected are have been categorized as natural language processing cases. And so in the second part of the presentation, so from now on, I will briefly present some results on these cases. I have to be quite quick because time is almost all over. So if you can move to the next slide, and next slide again. So first categorization we did is implemented pilot in development on the status of these cases. As you can see, those are the NLP study. If you go to the next slide, you can see also the NLP studies compared with the average of the 686 cases that we have. So you can see that compared with the overall average, NLP studies are more mature in a sense. So the 58% are already implemented, while the average is that 38% of the overall cases are implemented. So that means that they are more mature. So there are more cases that are already actually in use in daily routines in public operations. So I think this is an interesting evidence. If you go to the next slide, and the next slide again, we did something similar on the geographical extent. Here you see the distribution is quite similar. So we have almost 50% of cases that are national level, but also an important part of cases at local or regional level, and some cases that are multinational level. So I don't know, Horizon project or projects that are multi-countries. If you go to the next slides, we also clarified, thank you, the cases with the COFOG classification. So as you can see here, mainly 60% of cases under the NLP categories are general public services, so are cases that support the delivery of a public services, while the average is 30%. So this means that NLP cases are more often used to provide some sort of services to citizens. And if you go to the next slide, we can also see why, because the previous one, thank you, because mainly cases are, we have a lot of chatbot there. So chatbot is probably something that the public administration are starting using more and more. The technology is quite mature, so there are also possibility to do and to create and to propose chatbot with not that much effort in terms of innovation or implementation. I mean, there are a lot of standard, let's say more or less standard chatbot that you can use and reuse. So a lot of NLP cases are actually chatbot. Then you have 40 cases that are quite a lot on text analysis, and then you can see there all the other categories. So this is a categorization we did for this specific workshop in order to let you understand why we have all these general public service, etc. And now I have just a couple of minutes more, so I will present you just the next slide. Then I think we will have the slides. So, but I want to also be also more concrete and give you some concrete example of public administration that are using NLP in their daily operations. So on projects that are actually already implemented or under implementation. The first one is a chatbot. I put here a chatbot because as I was mentioning, if you go to the next slide, chatbot are the main category. So the first one is one chatbot that we found extremely interesting. That is this Una chatbot that has been proposed by the Register of Enterprises in Latvia. I think is interesting because it's not only answering to general questions, but citizen also can understand and can ask to the chatbots also the progresses of their document also. Is able to answer to specific information about a specific business. So he is actually having an interesting interaction with citizens and firms, not only like answering to general facts or questions. So this is one example, and you have also the link there if you want to try the chatbot. I think is also an interesting and a sort of a funny exercise. If you go to the next slide, there are also other examples. So here, for example, the Flemish Infoline is proposing a NLP system for categorizing phone calls. So thanks to this system, they were able to classify incoming phone calls. So not only transcribing them, but also like categorize them and support but also support the operator to give standard answers. So in order to not create disequalities in order depending on the operator that is answering to the phone call. If you go to the next slide, and I'm almost at the end, but I think it's interesting to have some examples there. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Norway is using NLP to classify reports, content of the report. So writing the report and classifying the content, also because they receive quite large amount of reports, so 6,000 reports per year. So I think they use this sort of NLP system to analyze and classify those documents and extract the key information, but also prepare summaries as the question before was asking. And last but not least, we have the last example here that is in Spain. So the example is called Veripoo, and is able to detect false police reports. So it's using here an example of a system that is using NLP together with machine learning, and they are estimating the probability of false police reports with significant accuracy. So they is able to detect the differences and understand if it's false or true report. So I think I'm done. This was the last slide. So if you, I hope I give you a brief overview of what we are doing. I'm sorry, I think I had to rush a bit to stay on time, but I mean, those are 4 examples. You have more in the database that is already published. You will have more in the new database that will be published soon. And happy now to answer to any questions.
Thanks a lot, Luca. It was very interesting, this overview on so many activities, interesting activities and examples like those from Spain, Lithuania and other countries. We don't have actually much time for question and answers because we are running out of time and we have a lot of presentations. However, please, you can put your questions in the chat box and Luca can reply to you. For the time being, Luca, maybe you can look at the comment from Cristina Gomez. If you can write the link to the Open Data Repository, and also from Elisa Di Nuovo, if you can share the link to the public report with the categorization.
I will do it now. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. So we move ahead. Now we go to the demo. We have two demos. One is on the Catalog of Service project, a link to this study report that we presented earlier on, and link to the Single Digital Gateway regulation. This demo will be conducted by Luis and Emidio. So please, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Miguel. So as Miguel said, the first demo was developed while writing the NLP study. And our problematic was how to improve public services accessibility while saving time using NLP. So 2 words about the context. So as part of the Single Digital Gateway regulation, a repository of links has been created to foster accessibility of public services. And this repository of links can be accessed by users using a search engine. And this search engine used actually meta tags that were in the web pages in order to improve the ranking. So in this context, do you not hear me?
We do.
We can hear you.
Okay.
And in this context, there were 2 goals of the prototype. The first one was to improve the ranking of the web pages, so indexed by the search engine, that describe public services. And the second was to reduce the time needed for sharing the required information, because in order to tag the web pages, it was done manually. And the goal of the prototype was to do it in an automated way. So briefly, how did we do that? So the input was really web pages. So in practice, we had an Excel with just URLs. And this URL, so it was really the web pages, and specifically we used NLP on the content of the web page. Then we used text classification techniques. So in practice, we used a word-to-vec model, and then we used a classification algorithm in order to use the content of the web page to have really fitted meta tags for the web page. And finally, we used an API in order to automatically enrich the web pages in the code. Okay, so what were the benefits for the user? So as I said before, there were 2 goals of that. First one was to improve the search engine, and second was to automatize the process of enriching the web pages. So the first goal, the first benefits for public services body was to automate the previously manual work. But also what's really interesting is that these prototypes that we have made can be scaled up easily. So in the context of the single digital gateway requirement for local authorities to provide some information by the end of 2022, this prototype can relieve a great amount of manual work from a civil servant. So now I will just give the floor to Emidio for a demonstration of the proof of concept. Emidio, are you?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you, Lee. I'm going to share my screen. So I go quickly on this demo. As already mentioned, Louis, web pages have to be tagged with certain meta tags in order to be harvested by a single digital gateway in order to be collected inside these repository links. The web page that you see here, it's about registering a new company for the Chamber of Commerce in Netherlands. this web page has some of the meta tags, but not all of them, that have to be harvested by the single digital gateway. What you see here, I'm refreshing the web page in the console log of the web browser. It's the NLP client, which is connecting to the NLP engine via the API, like Louis said already. Is analyzing what are the meta tags inside the web page, and contacting the API and providing the meta tags that are needed to the NLP engine, the URL of the web page, and the text of the web page. Then the NLP engine will reply with the meta tags and their value that are needed for the web page to be compliant with the single digital gateway. For example, one of the values is about acquiring licenses, authorization, or permits with a view to starting and operating a business, because indeed this page is about registering a new company in Netherlands. So here you see directly the benefit that a web page is automatically tagged in intrinsically inside the web page, so it can be automatically then harvested by the single digital gateway. And that's it on this.
Thank you, Emidio. So I'll take that again from current slide. Then I'll give the floor to Cécile with a demonstration of the CETA tool. So
hello. So first, I will not be making the presentation. It will be Vidas, but I want first to set the scene for this this project and how we are using, and we want to expand the use of CETA currently. So we started a project together with GRC and Vidas in particular, who will present, that will last. It was just kicked off and it will last until 2023. And this project aims at transforming the current CETA tool into an open source tool so that it can be also, we can create an open source community around it to enrich the existing capability of the tool. The idea is to open the models as well as the source. And so how do we want to do that? We invest on some use cases that are directed to policy officers in order to help them to facilitate their life in the policy making design. So the idea is to help them identify evidence from various sources, the legislation, but also scientific reports or impact assessment studies, and then to help them out in to gather evidence to build the new policies, and also to support them in screening new initiatives to assess how they can be impacted. So now, Vidas, as we have not so much time, the floor is yours, because I think already the demo will be very, very interesting.
Good morning, everybody. So I'll make a very, very short and very brief demonstration of a tool, CETA tool, which is actually have four main activities. CETA is focused on the harvesting various data sources. So it also focuses activities on building and training language models, also exposing various APIs so that the tool can be embedded in various other tools, and there's activity on user interface so that the user could access all that data and models and APIs through user interface. So I just briefly show a few examples, but it's not limited to what you can do actually with CETA tool. So just in the beginning, I want to show that CETA is about semantics, and it allows you to explore various concepts. And to make it briefly and quickly, I just made a few examples already for you that you can introduce search for various concepts and get similar or a map of specific concepts. Let's say now on the screen you see health concept as a query, and you automatically get the map of that specific concept, health. And it's you see that the map shows that it's related to mental health, well-being, occupational health, workers health, public health, healthcare, and various wide concepts. But also you can search also for various concepts like names and let's say Maria, what are related names to that specific name. And also you can look for concept like colors. If you query blue, you get other colors like gray, red, purple, orange, pink, yellow, all these main colors. But on the list on the left, you see also other colors like green, dark blue, colored, white. So, and also you can explore even very generic concepts like director. And you could see on this concept map that it can be coordinator, executive director, head, deputy director, director general, managing director, chief executive, and how this related terms can be even more extended. So, and this allows users quickly get understanding about the field, about the domain they are interested in, and quickly get knowledge of other concepts that you can use in your search space. So, and now I will show what you can search, not only to understand the concepts. And by the way, I want to say that all these concept maps and these relations are extracted automatically from data, learned from data, and there are no human in the loop here. So user then search data usually use keywords as main tool to find information. But here I will not demonstrate that part, but I want to show that here you can also search for using free text queries, and just to show you that you can use even queries, free text that are does not specify specific keywords or topics. And let's say I will type health issues during mission to the Mars. So actually, I believe that there are no documents that could explain this specific topic, but still I can search for documents. And if I look in query legislation part, seller data, I will find some specific documents. Let's say first on the topic is commission staff working document. Okay, it's very interesting, no title. But if I go inside that document, you will see that this document is about, just quickly, towards a space strategy for European Union that benefit its citizens. So you see, this is a really big document about space activities of the European Union. It's very generic. So it means that not so much about Mars or health issues. Sorry, come back to. Okay. But also I can search for other sources. Let's see, now I was searching only in Eurolex data, but also I can search in Bookshop, Cordis, PubSec, Open Data Portal. And you will see that, and all other sources usually covers more scientific data. And for example, in Cordis, you will see that Cordis in Cordis on the first page, we find documents like towards human exploration of space, Europe strategy. But when the next one, you will see that the development and validation of an innovation nutritional solution to fight muscle atrophy during human space flights. So habitability of Martian environment. So all Mars analogs for space exploration. So you can quickly get find documents that are related to your specific topic, which you describe as free text. So I think it's a very useful tool for many policy officers. So this is very brief. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidas and Cécile. Indeed, it's a very useful tool, and I've been using it in the commission, and it's very handy. Also, thank you to.
Can we still have some minutes to
very briefly, Cécile, we are running.
Yeah, so there were or Vidas in the chat. I tried to answer some questions.
Yes,
but
I was going to address this. Cécile, I was going to address this. We have a question from Andreas. It's about Andrea. Maybe you want to take the floor and explain much better the use of graphs with NLP. Andreas? But otherwise, we answer the question. The question is, are you combining NLP with graph technology, for example, Neo4j, Tiger Graph, etc.?
We don't use. Actually, we use these recent neural language models to infer knowledge from data, and we only store. During harvesting, we gather all this metadata, but usually we don't do any specific annotation yet, and don't use any graph approaches.
Okay, I hope that's that has answered the question. And there is another question by Rebecca: is multilingualism? If is multilingual the tool and can make links between concepts in different languages?
At the moment, user can use search only in English, but this year there is a work in progress so that people could search in multilingual approach, so that even not only, let's say, search in German or Greece or Italian, but also to make a query. Your query could be in German, but you can search in Dutch. So it will be in the interlingual search.
Can I add to that, please? Sorry, I am no expert in the domain, but I know that there are some problems, for example, regarding some concepts which have no correspondence. For example, I made the example in the chat. For example, you have in Spanish, you can have pez and pescado, where, you know, pez is the living fish and pescado is the dead fish, whereas in English, you only have fish. So how are you going to manage when you have, for example, more words for just one word for different concepts in different languages? How are you going to manage that?
So in general, we don't do any management here of these concepts. It's inferred automatically from data. So if if from data we infer that there are several concepts related in specific language, then we will show it. So as a human, let's say, we cannot manage it manually. So if we find it in the data, it will be exposed.
So it means that the data can also be wrong then?
Yes, but it's what data what it's a knowledge we made. Let's say we express in our data. So. Yes.
And we have a part of our study or our project, sorry, that is to really analyze bias. And I think Vidas, it's also an important part of our study project, and to study this aspect and to make sure that we don't create bias from there.
Okay, thank you. And
I just also can add to this answer a little bit more. But for example, using this knowledge or concept in inference of relations, you also can find concepts that are written with some incorrect, let's say, in various transcription variants. So even if it's transcribed in different variation, you will see all these variations. Even, for example, if you search, I would try to show you European Commission, you will see many variants of misspelled, how it is misspelled in documents.
And what about homonyms, if that's the
Sorry, we need to stop. We
pronunciations?
don't have time. Maybe you can discuss it offline in the chat bot, in the chat box, or even bilaterally. I'm afraid we are running out of time. Thanks a lot. Very interesting presentations, and we need to jump to the next one by Emmanouil. He's going to present to us the Digital Education Action Plan and how they are piloting very interesting initiatives around artificial intelligence and analytics. So please, Emmanouil.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for the invite. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, and I suppose that you can also see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Please allow me some time to open it in full mode. Okay, is it still visible?
Yes.
Okay, so once again, thank you very much for the kind invitation. My name is Emmanouil Maragkoudakis. I'm a team leader.
Emmanouil, maybe you can put it in full screen because we can see next slide and the current one is much smaller. Maybe just in the conversation.
Sorry, yeah, I need to change my. I have two screens. Just a moment, please.
Yeah. Voilà.
Is it better now?
No. Not yet. We see that two screens yet.
If you have two monitors, I think you can share the second monitor. This is the principle.
Thank you. Just a moment, please. Sorry for the delay.
Yeah, now it's full screen, only single screen. Please go ahead.
Okay, so thank you once again. My name is Emmanouil Maragkoudakis. I'm a team leader in data analytics in DGT1 Data Services. And today I'm about to present you a successful, let's say, NLP initiative implementation from a starting phase of a proof of concept to a more mature phase of a project who is supposed to go live by June 2022. With regards to the stakeholders, very briefly, it's actually motivated by DGAC and the unit C4. And then DGAC came to Digi Informatics, and more specifically to our unit D1 Data Services. And we somehow sought collaboration initially with PwC in terms of implementing the proof of concept. And then upon a successful launch of the proof of concept, PwC also took over for some specifications of the requirements for the next project, and the implementation was performed by another vendor, which is called European Dynamics. So very briefly, DGAC has launched the DEAP, Digital Education Action Plan, that has some strategic priorities. The most recent ones for 2021 to 2027 include the fostering of the development of high-performing digital education ecosystem. And the other one is a strategic priority of enhancing digital skills and competitiveness for the digital transformation. However, when we started in the middle of 2019, the most prominent priority that led to action number 10 is to use artificial intelligence and analytics pilots. So very briefly, in simple words, action 10 on the Digital Education Action Plan was about how we can make the best use of the data available online to capture insights and improve decision-making in the education. And more specifically, we address the needs of use data and AI to predict future skills and skill shortages in order to demonstrate the added value of analytics for the definition of the education policies. So the challenge that DGAC, let's say, had in mind is that since data is currently vital for education and vocational training, by using the technology, we have now a plethora of data, created data. So we need to identify how AI could be used to exploit such data, and also to help make a comparative analysis on the evidence-based required policy measures. And finally, as a foresight, to use education and training institutions to help, education and training institutions to really catch up with the technological developments and make policy officers make better decisions in a better timeline.
Emmanouil, apologies. Could you lower the notes a bit so we can see better the slides? Thank you. Perfect. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for noticing that. Okay, so with regards to the context, as I said before, we had an initial collaboration with DGAC and our unit DGD1 for some AI pilots. And the context was to identify possible pilot projects. Within 6 months, we selected 2 proofs of concepts. Currently, after the successful implementation, we have now matured into evolving those projects into so-called services. And they are supposed to go live by June 22. Those mature services are not yet, of course, launched, but we have already engaged some higher education institutions to provide with some data in order to demonstrate the potential of AI towards these aspects. So for the 2 early developments, the pilots that were selected for implementation was about the skills map panorama. I will explain a bit later what it's about, and the impact of AI on sectors, also called as curriculum generator. With regards to the first pilot, the first proof of concept, we need to address the issue of connecting educational programs from higher education institutions, both in bachelor's and master's level, to jobs and vice versa. So why this is important? Because the Action 10 of Digital Education Action Plan is about AI and educational analytics. And in simple words, we are addressing the issue of how we can make the best use of data available online in order to capture insights and improve decision-making in education. So this pilot was about reading automatically the content of bachelor's and master's programs across several EU member states higher education institutions, and identify using NLP the potential skills that could be harvested by attending those programs. The other pilot, which is called the impact of AI on sector, was again on identifying how artificial intelligence can help identifying which topics of IT, and especially in artificial intelligence, are emerging in various professional sectors. Educational stakeholders such as university managers, policymakers, etc., can select a set of professional sectors provided by the NASI classification and visualize very quickly which AI topics are emerging based on the top-ranked research communities for this sector. So very briefly, for the next phase, those 2 proof of concepts have been evolved into services. So the skills map panorama has been now transformed into service 1, the skills and education matchmaking tool. As a user story, we can see that we're an employee from a university, and you would like access of data and analytics that can help you understand the relationships between education programs and real-world skills and occupations, so that you can compare what you are teaching to students, if it's required for the job market, and maybe you can modify the curriculum accordingly. The second proof of concept has been transformed into another service, which is called Service 2 Technology Watch for Education. And as a user story, again, you are an employee from a university and you would like to access the macro level data in order to understand what AI is, how their technologies are evolving, and compare this data to your own curriculum so that you can review and adjust the content accordingly. In the next slide, you see very briefly some excerpts of the user interface. I don't know if it's very clear, but for example, you can select an educational program as a
Emmanouil,
node.
maybe you can try to, let's say, switch to presentation mode. Voila, because it will be enlarged. But now we see the two screens. We see the two screens now. Okay. Go back, maybe it's better.
Sorry, maybe then I can share my slides and you can see it in a much better resolution. Apologies for that.
The slides in any case will be shared with all the participants later on. So.
Okay, but very briefly, it's like you have a graph where you can expand the educational program and you can see all the courses within, and then from each courses you can see which ESCO skills are better matched against this course, and from the ESCO skills you can also navigate through the corresponding occupations. And for the second service, you can have like a selection of the country and the university and the program, and then you can very briefly identify which AI emerging technologies are let's say, contained within the educational program according to the scanning of abstracts from papers of AI journals. So with regards to the maturity of this project from the proof of concept state into a service one, for the data sources, we used, of course, this is a projection because we don't have that much data, but this is like a projection if more than 2,000 educational programs are eventually added. So we have like a large database of educational data, which is more or less 45 gigabytes that can be spread amongst storage in an S3 bucket of Amazon and also some database in PostgreSQL, again in Amazon RDS. We have publications that are not, let's say, much of the size. It's 200 megabytes for the 5 years. We have the ESCO data set, which is also compressed and also expanded in the Amazon S3. And we use some trained machine learning models in order to identify which ESCO skills and occupations are better suited for each course that is contained within an educational program. And with regards to the architectural NLP decisions, I think this is quite interesting for you also to know about it. We used the sentence bird for producing the embeddings of the textual content between the course description and the ESCO skill description. We used Spark NLP for the pre-processing tasks of cleaning the text and the lemmatization. We used the ESCO dataset as a basis to construct a training dataset for the text classification module. We used the CSO classifier to identify which courses and publications are related to AI technologies. We used like a light GBM algorithm for identifying the relevant pairs of courses and skills. And as Digit, we have already some best practices in terms of maturing projects. We used to host this in our AWS cloud environment of Digit. Again, AWS and Azure are both members of the Cloud 2 framework contract of the European Commission. And for the big data platform, we used the Amazon EMR. And of course, everything in terms of pipelines and source code should be again in accordance with the EC regulations that we have somehow imposed in Digit. So we use GitLab as the CI/CD tool. And finally, we have everything as a Docker container approach, which makes the deployment quite effective. Okay, very briefly, in this slide, you can see the high-level context and the component diagram. So we have like I will start by the AI for Educat management system, which is again a web application frontend based on EUI that is also a reusable component within the European Commission that allows the people from universities to provide their curriculum data and the system administrators to manage the system in general. We have like a public portal, again, using the EUI components that allows public users to explore and analyze the data in the graph in other pie charts that I have already shown. We have also the backend, which is a backend web application that allows integration of corporate building blocks that interact with specific data sources, and also allows to have provision of curriculum data and retrieval of other external data sources like publications, abstracts from journals, etc. And finally, we have the backend artificial intelligence engines, which is like a set of NLP/machine learning algorithms for the needed AI processing, like calculation of the embeddings for the courses, plus the programs, calculation of the similarities and classifications of courses and occupations based on AI technologies. And this is also quite interesting, but I don't know if it's very clear. This is the data pipeline for the classification for both services. We have like a cleaning process of taking all the stop words, the lemmatization, creation of the embeddings, and then we estimate the similarity calculation, and then we feed all of them upon some manual annotation of valid pairs to a machine learning light GBM classifier in order to perform the final classification. And finally, as you see here, we have like a generic overall pipeline structure, and in Digit, it's quite essential for us to have all the pipelines in an automated mode, so that the moment that a designer or the contractor or vendor is implementing something in its source code, we can have like a repository in GitLab, and very quickly using Terraform scripting, we can migrate this to various environment, development, accept UAT and production. And by using our proposed pipeline, we can very quickly automate the process of deploying from just a simple matter of clicks into something that the users can very quickly see, and also scaled up using AWS technology in terms of sizing of the machines, sizing of the cluster, of the EMR, and also allowing more users to connect if there is a heavy load in terms of visitors. Thank you very much. I hope I was not too hasty, but I really tried to keep up within the 15-minute slot.
You did very well, Emmanuel. Thanks a lot. And for me, this is a discovery. I didn't know anything about this topic, and it's kind of a source of inspiration for other EU policies, how you are making most of these emerging technologies, let's say, to create new use cases, to automate things that didn't exist before. And these two services, skill and education matching tool and technology watch for education, these two examples are very impressive. All the luck with the follow-up and with the implementation of this in the future. I think it's a good example indeed, how you can make most of the data by using these technologies. We have a couple of minutes. Yeah, thank you. A couple of minutes, any questions? Or just a reflection on these pilots and this particular use case? Okay, if not, we go to the interactive session that will be conducted by Zsófia with Mural. So Zsófia now is to shake up a bit the audience and to get also their views on these topics.
Perfect. So if you go to the chat, I have shared a mural link. So if you can all click on it, and it will provide you with the option to join mural as a visitor. And we are going to have two exercises for you today. The first one, I'm going to wait a couple of seconds for everyone to join. The first time we are going to vote. So our first exercise will appear on your screen in a second. While everyone is joining, I will start the voting session. So our first question for you today is which applications are you interested in when it comes to NLP, and you will see exactly where you have to vote. So please select as many applications as you believe that you're interested in. The voting session started, so I'm going to provide you with 2 minutes to pick from the different applications. You can vote for more than one if you are interested in more than one, of course. We are not limiting you, so please share your opinion and your interest with us. I'm going to provide you with 2 minutes. I know it's not so much, but given that we only have 7 applications, I think it will be okay. So I'm gonna let you vote for the next 2 minutes. I can see that there are still some big people voting, so let's see. So also, if you haven't been able to join Mural and you have any technical issues, please let us know in the chat, and we can help you with that as well. Okay, yeah, I see that everyone is finishing slowly, so just to remind you, you still have 1 more minute to vote. So I see that no one has any technical issues, so that's great. Happy to see so many of you on the Mural board. Okay, a couple more seconds. Great to see you, to see so many of you active. So just 30 more seconds and we're gonna close the voting to see exactly which applications are you interested in when it comes to NLP. So let's see. I'm counting back from 10 seconds. Put your last vote and then we're gonna close the session. Okay. I'm gonna close the session, but of course we're gonna have a small discussion. So if there was something that was not you couldn't exactly show, that obviously we can discuss. So I can see that most of you are interested in the content categorization. The 25 votes went to this. We have also 22 votes for semantic text matching, and the third one was machine translation. So it's great to know that actually everyone is interested in something, but these were the top priorities for you. So thank you for voting. And then I think, given that being conscious of the time, we can go to the next question. So we know that some of you, when you join this session, you already have one project as an example that you're working on. And we would like to know what is this project. So if you double click on the screen, just what I did, you will have a post-it, and you can write in the post-it and write down your example project and share with us what is your example project, what you have been working on when it comes to NLP, and also what are the next steps. Do you need any support? Is there something that you would like to share about this project? So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to share your example projects, and also to share with us where you are with this project at this moment, what are the next steps, and where would you need help. So I'm going to let you take over. So if you're not familiar with Mural, if you double click on the screen, you will have a post-it to which you can write to. Great, I see that we are getting more and more sticky notes. I can see that we have already one from Malta. Perfect. Okay. If you have any technical difficulties, let us know in the chat, and then we will help you out. But I think everyone is managing really well. At least from what I can see, we have more and more post-its coming up. So. Given the time, we're going to give you 2 more minutes. I know it's a bit of a short time, but we still have one more presentation that we will have to get to. But it's really appreciated that you're sharing your projects with us. I see that we also have more and more projects coming up. maybe while while the others are filling out the post-it, I could see that from our colleagues from Malta were the first one to share, and I can see that and that it seems to be a finished post-it. So maybe if our Maltese colleagues can just say a couple of words about their post-its.
Yes, maybe Norman, or who is also from Malta.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, so everybody. So I'm Judy Attard. I work at the Malta Information Technology Agency, which is the branch, the IT branch for the Maltese government. And basically, we're working on this National Language Technology Platform project. It's a SAF Telecom funded project. We're currently trying to gather various states to train models. So basically, this will provide translation models between English and Maltese and vice versa, which are our two national languages. One particular pilot in this project is, excuse me, to use Maltese legislation. Since they exist in both languages, they will be perfect training data to train these models. So that is our current status at the moment. And if you have any suggestions, they are well welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for this, Judy. And I see we are getting a bit more post-its. We also have another post-it of the analysis of policy documents. I'm not sure who included this post-it, but if you can see a couple words, and also if you could provide your country or your name in the post-it, that would be really helpful for us. Great. I'll see that you're still working, so we will give you a couple more seconds to finish the notes. And thank you so much for sharing your stories with us.
Yes, we need to close this down in a couple of minutes. In the meantime, if anybody would like to take the floor and maybe explain, to elaborate the reply to this question and the specific support or insights you would need to achieve your goals, please do so.
See a comment from Flanders. I don't know if it seems that the microphone has been stopped working. So we see some comments from our Flemish colleagues about launching analysis of policy documents project with sandbox approach in Flanders. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if the microphone is working now. Seems like there is a technical issue on the side. But I believe, Miguel, as we have received already some projects, that we can move on to the next session of the mural. If you still have any other projects that you would like to include a mural, please do so. We will leave the mural open. And if you have any other questions, and if you have a project and you have questions regarding what are the next steps and what are the different supports that you would need on them, we are happy to hear from you. So please let us know. And thank you so much for being interactive on this session. And I give back the floor to Miguel for our next presentation.
Yes, thank you very much, Zsófia. And thank you all for your contributions. And the case of Flanders is very, very interesting. In the Commission, we are working a bit on this topic, so maybe we can be in touch with you later on. The next presentation is by the colleague from DG Connect, Georgi. He's going to present us on the regulatory compliance. How can public administrations comply with these regulatory requirements to have more, let's say, the legal insights to make sure that the technologies are respecting some principles, values, and of course legal considerations on privacy, data protection, and so on in the European Union. So Georgi, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope we can see my slides.
Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So yes, I'm pleased to give this presentation on regulatory compliance, and it will be through the lens of the Commission's proposal for an Artificial Intelligence Act, which is going to be negotiated and which, once adopted, is going to set out the main requirements for AI with regard to safety and fundamental rights, and it will be very relevant for the development and use of NLP systems. Next slide, please. So this is the overview. I will present the main logic and rationale of the AI Act, its main elements and principles, and what the possible implications are with regard to natural language processing systems. Then we will look briefly at the current state of play of the proposal and some relevant issues to follow and to look at, and we will outline some other possibly relevant legislation for NLP. Next slide, please. Sorry. So the main logic is that AI is beneficial and it should be encouraged, but at the same time it raises concerns in terms of fundamental rights and safety. And it is because we want to make sure that the use of AI does not violate our standards for fundamental rights and safety that we think we need to come forward with some rules. Next slide, please. These rules will apply across all sectors because when we look at some characteristics of AI and the risks that they bring, they are valid across the board, and the Commission therefore opted for a horizontal approach where the key regulatory choices are unified and consistent, and this also facilitates coherence with all other laws, for example, on data protection, on non-discrimination, and so on. Next slide, please. So what is the scope of this framework? The aim is to create a level playing field, so it will be applicable to all providers who develop and place AI systems on the Union market, irrespective of whether they are established within the Union or in a third country. It covers also users of AI systems established within the Union. That means public authorities or companies or natural persons under whose authority the AI is operated. And the regulation covers as well providers and users located in third countries where the output produced by the system is used in the EU. What is not regulated is AI developed or used exclusively for military purposes in the area of national security, and there are some exceptions for public authorities of third countries and international organizations in cases in the area of law enforcement and judicial cooperation. And then with regard to the technological scope, the definition of AI system can be found in Article 3 of the proposal, and it is based on the internationally recognized OECD definition. And in addition to that, Annex 1 lists the relevant techniques and approaches for the development of AI, which can be updated over time as the technology evolves. Next slide. So this is the risk-based approach of the AI Act. It aims to regulate not the technology as such, but rather on the basis of the way in which it is used in certain specific applications and what the level of risk to fundamental rights and safety is that these applications pose. So it identifies 4 categories of AI systems, among which on the top here, there is a limited number of AI systems for which we believe that they fundamentally go against European values. And we are proposing to prohibit them, and this includes certain manipulation techniques, social scoring, and certain biometric systems. Then the bulk of the regulation focuses on AI that presents a high risk, which will need to comply with mandatory requirements in order to address the associated concerns. Then we have the categories of AI systems with certain transparency-related risks and AI with minimal or no risk, which currently represents the large majority of current AI applications. Next slide, please. So zooming in on the high-risk category, there are two main groups. The first is AI embedded in regulated products, and the second is the standalone AI systems. For embedded AI, this includes all the systems which are embedded as a safety component in a product that is subject to a third-party conformity assessment under the sectorial product legislation. And the standalone AI systems include areas where which are identified as listed here, where under each area there are use cases, and the use cases are the ones which will be considered as high risk. So this means that the high risk classification happens in function of the intended purpose of the particular system. And these use cases may be updated over time through delegated acts as new applications and new risks emerge. Next slide, please. What does this approach mean for natural language processing systems? They are described in the study on NLP that we've been discussing as a form of AI that gives systems the ability to identify, process, understand, and or generate information in written and spoken human communications. So these are systems that can be trained to perform different tasks, and to the extent that the purpose is not determined in advance, and with that the degree of risk is not clear in the design and development stage, they would not immediately fall in the scope of the regulated categories of AI, according to the proposal. However, if the purpose turns out to be high risk, so if, for example, an NLP system is intended to be used in the context, let's say, of assessing the reliability of evidence when investigating a criminal offense, then it will be high risk. So in other words, if a user, let's say a public authority, decides to use it or to further develop it for a specific high risk intended purpose, then that public authority would become the provider of a high risk AI system for the purpose of the regulation, and it would have to make sure that the system is compliant with the mandatory requirements. Then on the other hand, if an AI system is already placed on the market by the provider, by the developer with a specific intended use as designed by him or her, including the specific context and conditions of use specified in the instructions of use, then the user would normally simply have to follow these instructions. Next slide, please. So I mentioned requirements, and here you can see them for high-risk AI systems, which will have indeed to comply with 5 essential requirements in order to ensure that the associated risks are mitigated. So they must first be fed with high-quality data to make sure the results don't come out biased or discriminating. They must be accompanied by detailed documentation about how they work for the authorities to be able to assess compliance. Then providers must as well share substantial information with users to help them understand and properly use the AI systems. They also have to ensure an appropriate level of human oversight, both in the design and implementation of the AI. And finally, they must respect the highest standards of accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity. And these are the benchmarks which need to be achieved, but the AI Act does not enter into the specific technical solutions which the providers need to and can determine themselves. And for this, there will be voluntary harmonized standards to operationalize the essential requirements. Then specific obligations are placed on the provider and the user in order to ensure that in practice, the system performs properly throughout its life cycle. And the bulk of these obligations is placed on the provider, as you can see, while the user's main obligation will normally be to use the AI system according to the instructions of use, and also to comply with certain other obligations regarding, for example, monitoring of the functioning of the system. And of course, to the extent that when training and testing or using an NLP system, personal data are being processed, the GDPR rules will apply too, and the user will have to do a data protection impact assessment as a result. Next slide, please. So here you see what in practice the process is if you identify yourself as a provider of a high-risk AI system. First, you have to check is in the first place the technology considered to be AI according to the definition. Then you have to see whether your system will be classified as high risk. If yes, then you need a quality management system and a risk management system, which should be in line with the requirements of the regulation. And before putting the system into service, you have to undergo an ex-ante conformity assessment where the conformity of the system with the rules will be checked. If the check is successful, then the system is going to receive a CE label, which is the sign that the AI is in conformity with the rules. And in addition to that, for self-standing AI systems, they should also be registered in a dedicated EU-wide database. Next slide, please. So we estimate that the high-risk and prohibited AI systems are going to amount to 10–15% of all AI on the market. But apart from that, the Act provides for a transparency-related obligation with regard to certain AI systems, and this includes, among others, the chatbots. So the idea is that it should be made very clear to people that they are interacting with an AI and not with a real person. And then at the bottom here, we have the AI which presents no risk or only a minimal risk. And this is indeed, as I said, the large majority, and they will not be subject to compulsory regulation, while the voluntary application of the requirements through codes of conduct is, of course, encouraged. Next slide, please. With regard to the governance, the proposal envisages that national authorities will have a key role in assessing whether the systems meet their obligations and for enforcing the rules. And it will be for member states to identify which national authority is best placed. And for EU institutions, bodies, and agencies, the European Data Protection Supervisor will act as a supervisory authority. And at the EU level, the EU Artificial Intelligence Board would be responsible for advisory tasks. The Commission will act as a secretariat of the board, and the idea is mainly to make sure that we have consistency and that we develop the framework dynamically over time to keep it up to date. Next slide, please. So this initiative is, of course, still at the level of legislative proposal, and the Parliament and Council are in the process of negotiating it. In the Parliament, the Committee on the Internal Market and Consumer Protection and the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs have a joint competence on the file, and they very recently published their draft report. It is expected that by December, the Parliament will have adopted this position, and in the Council, the Czech presidency will take over in July from the French presidency. And the timeline is to be confirmed, but all important elements are being debated very much, and some of them are very relevant for NLP systems and could indeed influence the future compliance in one or another way. So one question to follow is whether or what rules there will be for general purpose AI systems. As I mentioned, under the proposal, they are as such not subject to the obligations of the AI Act, but if someone uses them for a high-risk intended purpose, they would have to comply with all the rules. The approach of the Slovenian Council presidency, so from the second half of last year, was along these lines, but this is certainly not the definitive position of the Council. And the issue is still being debated a lot. The Parliament for now seems not to be in favor of having no rules at all for general purpose AI, so it really remains to be seen and to be followed how this will evolve and eventually what could be reasonably possible and needed to require of those who place general purpose AI on the market. Furthermore, the recent draft report of the two leading committees in the European Parliament proposes to add a number of new use cases to the list of high-risk AI systems. And I can mention, for example, that they propose to extend it to AI that generates text content that would falsely appear to be human-generated. Moreover, the report proposes to fully prohibit AI systems used for predictive policing. So the scope of these categories is developing, and all these proposals are going to be discussed, scrutinized, and the final outcome and how the different use cases will be classified in the end remains to be followed. Then another proposal of the Parliament for the moment is that users who are public authorities should as well register high-risk AI systems in the EU-wide database that I mentioned earlier. And it is also interesting to see how the governance mechanism will function in the final version of the regulation and what the division of roles is going to be between the Commission and the states, with some people arguing that there should be a more centralized enforcement system compared to the proposal. Next slide, please. And here we come to my final slide. So compliance with the AI Act is not the end of the story, and other legislation needs to be taken into account as well. So to the extent that personal data are being processed when training and testing or using NLP systems, the GDPR rules, of course, need to be complied with. The same is valid for sectoral legislation applicable to the concrete activity. Furthermore, any applicable intellectual property law, for example, on trade secrets or on the protection of computer programs, has to be taken into account. And the Digital Services Act, which is also in the process of being adopted and which will regulate online intermediaries and platforms, will be relevant for NLP systems that are used for online content moderation. So the specific application and context really needs to be analyzed carefully, and depending on that, it should be checked what other areas of the law, natural language processing applications might touch upon. And with this, I thank you very much. And I hope that this was useful and too long.
Very useful. Thanks a lot, Georgi. For me, it's also something I was not fully aware of. And it seems that is very much needed, indeed, to defend the digital rights. We have actually this political communication from early January on the European Union digital rights. So it goes hand in hand. All the best with the political negotiations. I hope now the reading is completed before the end of the French presidency, and then the upcoming Czech presidency will give a push to this. It's very impressive, and all the best. It's very much needed. I have a question. We have just a couple of minutes for questions from the audience. In the meantime, the question is there a similar initiative in another country outside the European Union, or it's just it could become the reference to the rest of the earth, let's say, on this topic?
So thank you very much for the question. Indeed, one of the important purposes of the Artificial Intelligence Act is to set the global standards for regulating AI. And this is the first such proposal, and to my knowledge, at least, there is no other comprehensive piece of legislation for artificial intelligence that has been proposed so far. And there is, of course, a lot of work going on at an international level to agree on common principles and standards for AI. So the work of the Council of Europe is to be followed, and also the OECD principles. But in terms of third countries, this is certainly the first proposal, and I am not aware yet of another similar piece of legislation.
Thanks a lot, Georgi. Any question, or we close down this session? Looks like people are just running out of the webinar because it's midday. Okay, so if there is not any further questions, we close down this presentation. Thanks again, Georgi. All the best.
Thank you. All the best to you.
Thank you. Yes, because we are also about to launch a new piece of legislation on interoperability, the new Interoperability Act for Interoperable Europe. Conclusions, very, very briefly. What is next in this project? Please, next slide. Well, I hope you have learned something. In the previous slide, we had a bit of a recap. but since we don't have time, upcoming activities, as I announced, one of the working strands that we carry out in this project is training material for public administration on how to build public service catalogs using new technologies, structured data models. So there is a new course on the Interoperable Europe Academy. Maybe we can put here the link. If not, we will share the information offline with the recording. A new course on the data model to structure the information around public services. That is the first step to create like interactive services through chatbots or NLP. Pretty soon, thank you for the link, Nathan. The new version actually of this data model, this vocabulary is going to be released in very few weeks. It's version 3.0. We, let's say, address some issues requested by some stakeholders. And if it happens that you are, let's say, officials working in public administration in your country of origin around the single digital gateway, we will have a webinar on the, I don't remember the date. Do you remember, Nathan? Is it the 13th or the 11th?
It's May 11th.
May the 11th.
Yeah.
We will send we send the invitations already, if I'm not mistaken.
Indeed.
Okay. So we will have a follow-up on the SDG because we are piloting some activities with some countries on how to make most of these structured data models using semantic tagging to improve the results of the let's say of any search in your Europe portal about administrative procedures linked to this gateway, single digital gateway, and the regulation with all the different 21 administrative procedures and annexes 1 and 2 on areas covered by the regulation. And we are working now also how to make most of it with the new, let's say, approach that will be like a guided search in the portal. So there will be this webinar on the 11th. And that's it from my side. If the team would like to add something, I don't know, Zsófia, Nathan, Emidio, Florian, or...
Just want to thank for all the participation and obviously for the speakers as well. And if you have, I see that there were some remaining questions and ideas and more room for discussion. So if you would like to get in touch and discuss these, you see on the slide all of the places where you can reach the catalog of services action. So please do so. We would like to hear from you and of course further discuss these points. And of course, thank you, Miguel, for doing the moderation.
Thank you. Thank you, the team, for the organization, and absolutely thank you to all the speakers. Very interesting presentations. I learned a lot. Thanks to this webinar, I'm now aware of some working areas inside the Commission that I was not aware of, also from the legal side. So looking forward to meeting you soon in another webinar. All the best and enjoy the lunch break. Thank you, bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much. Very interesting.